Hello and welcome back to AEF TV in association with Engerati. We're now joined by Lucy from the Development Bank of Southern Africa, and we were talking a little bit off air, and one of the themes we want to explore in this interview is about the challenges of getting more renewables onto the grid, or maybe not onto the grid, but getting more renewables into the mix. What are you seeing on the ground?
Okay, I think if I could start at the beginning, the first thing that we needed to do is in the South African context is to get the regulatory framework sorted. And so that was the first step that was taken. DBSA was involved in that together with the Department of Energy in order to sort out the regulation. Then after that came the actual implementation phase, whereby the challenges there were around getting the communities that needed to participate to have their equity obligations met.
So when you say equity obligations, as in the communities have a stake in this project, or how does that work?
Yes, correct. The communities have a stake in the project, and so the issue was how to get them to get their financing that they needed in order to secure those equity obligations. Yeah.
And what's the role in terms of the role of the bank in sort of helping facilitate, make all of this happen?
Yeah, so the DBSA has been involved in actually financing that equity stake so that the communities can then participate at an equity level, and that's the role that we've played so far.
So they would come to you, and you would go, right, okay, that everything stacks up, therefore we're going to release the money, and then how do the income streams happen, and how does all of that work?
So traditionally the projects are put together by the lead developer. So the lead developer would come, and the communities within a 50-kilometer radius of the project. So they would come, the lead developer would come, and then together with them would sort out the financing for the community stakes.
So are these projects sort of developer-led or community-led, or is it chicken and egg a little bit?
The lead developer should be one of the IPP players that's going to put together the whole project, yeah. And then there's a community stake within the project company.
And what are some of the challenges of getting the renewables, and getting sort of renewable projects into the mix? Because you kind of mentioned that there are a few of those, and what are the challenges that you're still sort of tackling around renewables?
Well, I think one of the things that we've tackled is the issue of the community involvement. It's still unfolding in the sense that they have to get involved now after the construction is over. So most of the projects, some of the projects have now reached commercial operations date, and now is the time to get the communities involved. So it's about driving that meaningful community involvement.
And that community involvement, how does that manifest itself? Does that mean the community starts taking over the running of the projects? I mean, how are the communities getting involved in the project?
Well, they're involved, for example, during the construction phase. Most of them had actually, they were employed people from the surrounding communities in order for it to work. But then obviously after construction, then the jobs at that phase get over, so they still need to be involved. And then as you asked before, how does the community get involved in terms of the actual lifespan of the project? They do get a dividend flow.
Right.
Yeah, and that then needs to be over the life of the project, so they need to get more actively involved.
And you also mentioned when we were talking about that you're looking at sort of smaller projects and things like that. So what's the future of that? How are those coming on stream, and how are you tackling on some of those? I would imagine the smaller projects may be more rural, but what's the difference with those?
The Small Projects IPP program is still one of the programs under the Department of Energy's IPP program. So the way we are tackling it, in order to build some scale, we put together a standardized platform together with our partner, that's the KfW. And within that platform, we'll have some standardized documents to lower transaction costs and make it easier for the smaller developers to participate in this, and the small, medium, and micro enterprises.
So when we say small, medium, and micro, what's the scale of those?
Well, it's those that would not be involved in one of the larger projects because
Gotcha.
these are small projects between 1 and 5 megawatts.
Okay.
So it's a different scale of participation.
And when you've put that together, what's the? I mean, where is that program? What's the engagement been like? What's the take-up been like? And who are the actors you're trying to influence? Are there different actors that you would influence in a small project than in a large project? Is there actually maybe more community involvement in a smaller project, ironically, than a larger one?
Well, the main actors that we're trying to influence, they are the small, medium, and micro enterprises so that we can get them involved in the program. So it's almost different from the large program in the sense that here the emphasis is on those small, medium, and micro enterprises.
So these would be businesses that are saying that, look, we're having issues with power or energy supply, and they would then come together and say, well, can we solve this ourselves, or is that the sort of thinking behind it?
So it's the businesses that want to participate in the IPP program, but at a smaller scale.
Right.
And obviously the challenges that they have are those around transaction costs. It's quite costly to put bids together, and therefore we are trying to develop
So you've removed
a standardized platform.
Yeah.
We've not removed it, but we've created some solutions.
You've made it easier.
Yeah, we've created some solutions together with KfW so that it can be easier in terms of that. Yeah.
So when you've got, and are all of these projects renewable projects? Is that one of the things, or can there be any form of power, or is the preference towards renewables?
At the moment, the small IPP program is for the renewables projects. Yeah.
And so when you're putting the sort of renewable power onto the grid, I assume, what's also going on behind the scenes to strengthen the grid so that, because I would imagine the vision is that, okay, we can create all these smaller projects, and by standardizing it, we can achieve scale by having more of them, so that delivers the scale piece. But what's happening at grid level to be able to deal with, let's plan for success, this all works, and you hit your targets, and all these little things come on board, and when we say little, actually they aren't that little, but let's stay with that vernacular. What's happening at grid level to be able to take all of that and not destabilize everything?
So currently there is a working group that's at a government level to try and make sure that there's a coherent approach in order to make sure that the projects that are delivered can be actually delivered onto the grid. So there's work being done in that respect.
How much do you think that there should be an onus on the people who are building and delivering these power projects to also contribute towards the grid?
So there are some projects that are actually contributing as well. Some have the self-build option for the transmission bit. So there are some projects, but in order to make sure that it's coordinated, there's this work that's going on at government level.
Like a steering group
Yes,
or a committee. And do you think with the success of the power projects within South Africa that there could be the independent power project, there could be some way of replicating that onto the transmission grid, and we could see sort of independent grid operators coming up as well? Is that an area that you think should be looked at?
Well, we still will wait for the recommendations from the work that's going on to see what's the most feasible.
And when are those recommendations coming out?
Well, there's still quite a bit to be done.
Right.
So I think maybe in the next year we'll have something to talk in more definitive terms.
Okay, and in terms of us kind of getting to the time that we've got here in the interview as well, and I just wanted to touch on it a little bit about the workshop that you're running here and you're part of. I don't know whether it's happened or is going to happen, but what are some of the things that you're trying to get out of that meeting?
So we are trying to build awareness in terms of the work that we've been doing together with KfW on the small IPP program, and that's just to present what the constraints have been. And essentially, as I mentioned, it's about the transaction cost. I think that has been a huge constraint. And secondly, also in terms of access to financing, because the smaller projects have a much more difficult time trying to raise financing in a traditional way. So we are trying to create that standardized platform that will help alleviate some of those constraints.
And in terms of the access to financing, is the issue that the financiers just aren't interested in that amount of finance, or does it come back down to the work you've done in terms of having that standardized thing so that you're actually going to finance, in the right way? Or is it a bit of both? I mean, where's the issue with the access to finance?
Well, I would say, speaking as a lender ourselves, we find that the smaller projects are hard to finance because your costs are also high. The costs are almost the same when you have to do a small project vis-a-vis a big project. So when you put all those costs together, the transaction costs make it not doable. That's one point. So you find that a financier will say a small project, quite a lot of work, and then when you load those costs onto the project, it becomes non-viable. Secondly, when you look at the risks involved, you need to find a way of putting it together so that it makes sense for the financier and it makes it a more palatable proposition.
And in the work you're doing with sort of standardizing the documentation, everything, you're pushing down that transaction cost side of things. What about the risk element? I mean, what's being done to de-risk the smaller projects more?
So in terms of what we're doing, we're trying to create a portfolio of projects so that each of them have on a different level on the risk spectrum. So when you look at them, they'll be in different stages, and you'll have a mix of projects.
So would you
that helps to standardize.
Would you go to a financier with a whole bunch of projects clustered together and say, look, it's not just one, but it's all of these?
Yes, correct.
Right.
So we have a portfolio, and the intention is once those projects in their portfolio are de-risked, once construction is has kicked in terms of getting to the end of that process, that's commercial operations date, then we can then say to the other players in the market, these are the projects in the portfolio, this is the performance, would you be interested in participating?
So it's a portfolio investment
rather than
portfolio
approach rather than one single.
That's smart. Yeah.
One by one,
Yeah.
because that can be quite difficult for any financier.
Yeah, I can imagine. And is that quite unique? Are you sort of leading the way in an African context with this sort of portfolio-based approach?
I would say I haven't seen it before. I could have missed something, but I have not seen the portfolio approach done yet.
Well, I hope it works. You clearly are working on putting it together. I'm sure it will work. One of the last questions as we get to the end of our time here, you're obviously here at AEF, we're in Dubai, ironically dressed in suits because it's freezing in here. But what are some of the things that you're looking forward to getting out of the conference and the meeting over the next few days? Either from a personal level or here professionally?
Well, one of the good things I think about AEF is that there are different stakeholders from very many different countries, so it's always useful to listen to them and to get, one, to understand what their constraints have been, and two, to also understand what their successes have been. So I think that's very useful. Secondly, the networking is very good in the sense that there are quite a number of high-level delegates, so you get access to people that you'd not ordinarily have easy access to. And so there's that platform for communicating and for networking with people and sharing of ideas, both challenges and successes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, on that note, we'll leave it. And thank you very much for watching. It's been another interview at AEF TV. Many more to come. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you.